Do you ever spend hours mixing a lo-fi beat, only for it to somehow sound smaller after adding compressors? Like the vibe disappeared the more you polished it. In this episode, we're talking about why overcompression is quietly killing the emotion in your music, and how simple volume automation can bring back movement, warmth and clarity without making your mix feel lifeless.
You're listening to the Lofi Music Academy podcast, your go-to space for all things lo-fi. Sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of lo-fi music production.
Hi, and welcome to the Lofi Music Academy podcast. I'm Spencer J, your guide through the chilled out, atmospheric world of lo-fi beats. Today we're talking about volume automation instead of compression. Now obviously compression has its place. This isn't one of those episodes where we pretend compressors are useless. They're incredibly important tools. But a lot of producers, especially newer producers, end up using compression for problems that are actually arrangement or volume problems. And when that happens, the mix starts fighting itself. You know the feeling, your sample feels too inconsistent, so you throw on a compressor. The piano jumps out in one section, so you add another compressor. Your drums don't feel glued together, so again, more compression. Then suddenly everything feels smaller, flatter, and somehow both louder and weaker at the same time. And the reason this happens is because compression is often treated like a shortcut for control. But music isn't supposed to be perfectly controlled, especially lo-fi music. Lo-fi is emotional because it breathes. The imperfections, the dynamics, the slight rises and falls in energy, that's the human part. So today I want to show you a different mindset. Instead of constantly squeezing sounds into place, what if you simply guided them? What if you shaped the energy manually, intentionally, almost like riding the emotional flow of the track? That's where volume automation becomes powerful, because sometimes the cleanest mix isn't more processing. Sometimes it's just turning something up or down at the right moment. And once you start hearing automation as a creative tool instead of a technical correction tool, your mixes start to feel alive again. Okay, let's get into it. One of the biggest misconceptions in music production is that compression automatically improves a sound, and it doesn't. Compression magnifies decisions. If the source already feels emotionally balanced, compression can enhance it beautifully. But if the source is inconsistent in a musical way, compression can actually exaggerate that chaos. Think about a piano loop with expressive playing. Some notes are soft, some are harder, some naturally bloom longer than others. That movement is part of the emotion. But if you aggressively compress it just to make the waveform look even, you're flattening the performance itself. And this happens constantly in lo-fi production because producers often chase smoothness without realising they're removing personality. Another issue is that compression changes tone and not just volume. Every compressor shapes transients differently. Some darken the sound, some add harmonics, some soften attacks. So when you stack compressors trying to fix volume inconsistencies, you're also unintentionally reshaping the character of the sound over and over again. Then producers end up asking questions like, why does my mix sound dull? Why does everything feel lifeless? Why don't my drums hit anymore? A lot of the time it's because the music has been over-controlled. Volume automation, on the other hand, is transparent. It doesn't necessarily change the tone, it simply changes attention. And attention is what mixing is really about. Mixing is guiding the listener's focus from moment to moment. That tiny guitar phrase that disappears, maybe it doesn't need compression. Maybe it just needs a couple of dB lift for 2 seconds. That snare that suddenly feels too loud in one section. Maybe it doesn't need transient shaping. Maybe it just needs one automation point pulling it down slightly. These are small decisions, but they preserve the natural movement of the music. And preserving movement is incredibly important in genres built around atmosphere and emotion, especially in lo-fi, where listeners aren't searching for perfection, they're searching for feeling. Here's a mindset shift that can help. Imagine you're the person manually riding the faders during a live performance. Before automation existed digitally, engineers literally moved mixer faders by hand whilst the track played. They performed the mix in real time, and because of that, mixes often felt more human and dynamic. Now we have unlimited plugins, unlimited processing, and infinite tweaking. But sometimes all that convenience disconnects us from the listening emotionally. Volume automation forces you to listen. You stop staring at meters and start asking what moment actually feels too loud. Where does the emotion disappear? What deserves attention here? That's a completely different creative experience. And honestly, this approach can reduce a lot of anxiety in music production, because instead of trying to solve everything with complicated technical chains, you begin trusting your ears again. A vocal too buried, lift the phrase. Bass overwhelming the hook, lower it slightly. Your hi-hats are too harsh in one section, pull them back manually instead of over EQing the entire track. These moves are simple, but simplicity is often what creates warmth in a mix. A lot of producers secretly believe professional mixes are complicated, but many professional mixes are actually the result of incredibly intentionally small adjustments, tiny moves, tiny balances, tiny moments of attention. And automation is one of the most direct ways to create those moments intentionally. It's less about fixing sounds and more about supporting the emotional arc of the song. That's a completely different relationship with mixing. Let's talk practical examples, because this is where producers usually start realizing how powerful this actually is. The first place I recommend using volume automation is melodies and samples. If you're using jazz samples, vinyl chops, Rhodes or guitars or ambient textures, there are often moments where certain notes disappear while others may poke out too hard. Instead of compressing the entire sound aggressively, automate the problem areas manually. This keeps the original dynamics intact while smoothing out what actually needs smoothing. Another good use is drums. For example, maybe your kick and snare relationship feels inconsistent throughout the track. Instead of crushing the drum bus harder, automate certain snare hits slightly lower or bring specific kicks forward during emptier sections. This creates movement without destroying punch. Automation is also great for transitions. You can slowly lower instrumental layers before a drop, raise ambience during emotional moments, fade textures in gradually, duck melodies behind vocals manually. These tiny changes make tracks feel cinematic without needing complicated effects chains. And one of my favourite uses of automation is on reverb sends. Instead of drowning an instrument in constant reverb, automate the reverb amount only at the end of phrases. Suddenly the mix feels spacious without becoming muddy. That single technique can make lo-fi tracks feel way more immersive. The important thing is this: automation lets you make contextual decisions. Compression reacts automatically. Automation reacts intentionally, and intentional mixing almost always sounds more emotional. One reason producers avoid automation is because it feels slower. Dragging automation points around isn't as exciting as loading a plugin preset. It requires patience, listening, replaying sections repeatedly. But honestly, slowing down is sometimes exactly what improves the music. There's this pressure online to produce faster and faster, finish beats in 10 minutes, mix instantly, master with AI, upload constantly. And while this speed has its place, emotional music usually benefits from attention. Automation encourages attention. You start noticing details you previously ignored, the way the piano breathes, the way the bass swells emotionally in one section, the way silence before a snare creates anticipation. Those details are the soul of lo-fi music, and when you slow down enough to shape those moments manually, producing starts feeling less mechanical. It becomes more like painting. You stop trying to win the mix, you start sculpting atmosphere. And honestly, that mindset can help reduce creative burnout too, because instead of endlessly stacking plugins, searching for perfection, you're interacting with the music directly. You're making decisions with intention rather than reaction from frustration. That's a much calmer creative state, and calmer producers usually make better music. Now, to be clear, this isn't an anti-compression episode. Compression is still incredibly useful. The real goal is understanding when compression should support the sound instead of replacing intentional balance decisions. A healthy workflow often looks like this. Use gentle compression for tone, glue or control. Then use automation for emotional movement. That combination is powerful. For example, you might lightly compress a vocal to smooth out overall dynamics, but still automate phrases manually so every lyric feels emotionally balanced. Or lightly glue your drum bus together while still adjusting individual hits that feel distracting. This approach gives you the best of both worlds, consistency without lifelessness. Because the danger isn't compression itself, the danger is depending on it for every problem. When every mix gets solved with more processing, the mix usually loses contrast. And contrast is what creates emotional impact. Quiet moments matter. Dynamic moments matter. Unexpected rises matter. Music needs movement. And automation preserves movement beautifully because it allows you to shape dynamics without flattening them entirely. That's why so many experienced engineers rely heavily on automation, even with access to world-class gear and plugins. Sometimes the smartest move is also the simplest. I think underneath all of this is a deeper creative lesson. Trust your ears more than your visuals. A lot of producers get trapped watching waveforms, LUF meters, gain reduction meters, spectrum analyzers, constantly trying to make music look correct. But emotional music rarely comes from visual perfection. Sometimes the slightly louder piano note is the emotional moment. Sometimes the imperfect vocal dynamic is what feels human. Sometimes the rise and fall of volume exactly what makes a loop hypnotic. Automation teaches you to respond emotionally instead of mathematically. And that's an incredibly valuable skill, because at the end of the day, listeners don't care how technically controlled your mix is if it doesn't make them feel something. They remember atmosphere, they remember emotion, they remember moments. So next time something feels inconsistent in your mix, pause before immediately reaching for another compressor. Ask yourself, could I simply automate this? That single question can completely change the way you mix. And honestly, it can make producing feel lighter too. Less fighting, less overthinking, less processing, more listening, more intention, and more music. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this episode, it's this. Not every problem needs fixing. Some moments just need guiding. Volume automation is one of the most human tools in music production because it allows you to shape emotion directly. You're not forcing sounds into place, you're gently leading the listener through the experience. And especially in lo-fi music, that subtlety matters. So this week try mixing a track with less compression than usual. Challenge yourself to solve problems with automation first. Ride the levels manually, listen closely, respond emotionally. You might be surprised how much bigger, clearer and more alive your mixes start to feel. And more importantly, you may find yourself enjoying the process again instead of constantly trying to correct everything. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review or sharing it with fellow music producers who might find it useful. Until next time, keep creating, stay inspired and remember, it's all about the vibe. Take care and see you in the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lofi Music Academy podcast. If you're ready to start making lo-fi music and want to go even deeper, grab your free guide. Discover the 6 essential steps to create a release-ready lo-fi track from scratch. Whether you're using budget gear in your bedroom or a small home studio, this guide will help you get that polished, dreamy lo-fi sound you're after. Just go to www.lofimusicacademy.com. Until next time, keep creating those laid-back vibes, and don't forget to subscribe for more lo-fi tips and tricks.